Welcome to the Racing Lanes podcast. I am your host, Rico. I will be joined here shortly by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. And today we have a very provocative conversation to be had. We're going to talk a little bit about leasing trucks versus buying trucks. Should you own your truck and equipment, or is it better or more profitable to lease a truck? I'm kind of on the fence on the subject myself, so this is going to be a very, very, hopefully provocative and informative show for everyone involved. If you would do us a huge favor, if you find any of the information that we present entertaining, useful in any way, or you know someone that may benefit from it, by all means, please like, share, and subscribe to the show. And with that being said, let's bring on my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
We're doing great, Rico. You know, this is a subject that I just love talking about because it's one I feel I've had so much experience with, and I've run this thing both ways so many times, and I'd love to talk about it with our listeners. It's certainly a provocative conversation, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you for the benefit of our audience.
So right off the bat, I'm gonna throw a difficult question at you right off the bat.
Go ahead.
For someone that they're in a position where they may not want to scale their business, so to speak. They may just be satisfied with being one truck, one trailer. Do you think that leasing a truck, doing a lease versus owning a truck outright, do you think that may be something that they should entertain, or do you think that may be that may be the caveat for them to maybe consider just going outright and buying a truck or owning the equipment?
There's a bunch of things to consider. Number one, how much revenue are you going to bring in with that truck? Okay, because leasing a truck is, or renting a truck even, the costs between a long-term lease, and we'll use the two largest and really the only two national ones I know of. I guess International has something out there with their national lease, but they're nowhere near the size of Penske and Ryder.
Right.
Those are the two national ones now because they bought everybody else out pretty much in the industry. There's some local regional carriers or leasing companies and rental companies throughout North America, but they're small. They don't have the size that the two big ones do. But the first thing you have to look at is what am I using the truck for? Where am I running? How many miles am I running? If you are running a lot of miles, if you're running somewhere between starting at 100,000 miles a year up to a team operation, then you should start looking at it. Number two, what are you doing? What sort of work are you doing? Are you doing really heavy work where maybe it's heavy haul and you're not doing tons of miles, but you're just hitting that 100,000 mile a year? But you have heavy equipment and you've got cranes waiting at either end to load you. So being on time is very important. The other thing about heavy haul, and that's a perfect application for it. The thing about heavy haul is that it's hard on equipment because it's heavy. Okay. So you've got a lot of permitted overweight loads, over length loads, especially the overweight ones. They take a toll on equipment.
Right.
Now all of a sudden you're hauling these transformers that weigh, a couple 100,000 pounds. You've got all sorts of axles under them. Your normal diesel engine it's getting beat doing that work. So to go out and buy a truck today, you're looking at, for a truck for that application. In the U.S., I'm guessing you're probably looking for just a tandem axle, heavy spec truck, brand new. You're looking at probably around $200,000 anyways. with all the latest technology and all the latest anti-pollution devices and everything else. Um, if you go to somebody like Penske or Ryder, what I have found is on a heavy application. It's not one of the rental trucks. They would order a truck for you, or they may have one somewhere in their fleet. They would put you in, but they pay a lot less for a truck than you do
Right.
because they're buying huge volume. These companies take, they're like they're like the Werners and the Hunts of the world, maybe even I guess bigger. They're buying 5,000 trucks at a crack. So where Rico or Chuck buy one truck or maybe four trucks, these guys buy 5,000 trucks. They're getting a hell of a lot better deal. They're getting better warranty. They're getting everything better, and they service it. And when that truck breaks down, they replace it. So, and they have really stringent preventive maintenance policies that work in your favor, because they will pull an alternator off at, let's say, on a certain engine, at, let's say, 150,000 miles, whether there's something wrong with it or not. They just pull it off and replace it because they know after years operating that truck that alternator they find only lasts for 160,000 miles on average. Truck's got 150, get rid of it now. We don't want a service call. That's what they do. The problem is if you're just hauling dry freight or reefer freight off the spot market, you got to make sure you're going to have enough money to pay for that lease.
Right.
But the one thing about it that I found, number one, it's a true reflection of the cost of operating a truck. So if you just phoned Ryder or Penske, or there's another one, Pack Lease, that's owned by PACCAR or whoever, and got a price, and you go, oh my God, I can't afford this. This is crazy. What are those guys talking about? Well, you better take a look at your business.
Right.
Because this is the real cost of a truck. These guys know. They're no different than the models that JB Hunt and Schneider and Werner. They know the cost of operating a truck. Okay, that's what it costs. You may not agree with them, but that's what it costs Penske or Ryder. And I don't know how you and I can operate a truck any cheaper than they can, because we have to pay more for that truck. We have to pay more for that filter. We have to pay more for that oil, than they do. They buy tanker loads of oil. You and I buy a case of oil, and we think we're big shots because we bought a case.
well, let's break down for a second, Chuck, because let's be honest. We met through a mutual friend, Kevin Rutherford. We met through one of the CMCs, is where we initially came acquainted with one another. And back in those days, it was one of the things that we were being told as far as what Kevin was preaching. And I think that, and I got it started when I was listening to Kevin. I was a company driver. I got started because I wanted to have the control to be able to own my own business and things of that nature. And Kevin was teaching about how you can really get started in business with a truck at that time for about $10,000. And I was like, okay, I had tried doing being a lease operator once before, and I failed miserably at it my first go around. And I jumped out there and I said, man, if I can buy a truck for $10,000 and operate my own business, that might be a good alternative. So I started investigating, listening a lot more, and doing my research for maybe about a year or two as I was listening to Kevin going up and down the road on XM radio. At that time, Kevin was on like around the midnight hours or whatever. And my shift I was running a midnight shift basically overnight. And so during that time, man, it was true. You could go out and you could find a nice, decent truck that may had a little wear and tear to it, but you could kind of breathe a little life back into that puppy, and for about $10,000, you could get a pretty decent truck and get pretty decent fuel mileage. And they with operating a truck and finding a truck that you owned outright for that cheap, you could really make some serious money doing it that way. Now, when you got trucks that are, it's harder to get a hold of those and back then we were talking about pre-emission trucks.
Yes.
It's very difficult to get a hold of because the supply of the pre-emission trucks has kind of dwindled down a good bit now. And now all you have are the emission trucks that don't offer the same amount of the pre-emission trucks. They were pretty much bulletproof. You had a lot more reliability out of those trucks versus the trucks that have all of the EGR, DPF, and all the different things that are on the older trucks nowadays that you can probably pick up for about $10,000. So I think that one of the things that people were talking about then, your fuel mileage was comparable, but now with the newer trucks, they're saying a lot of people are saying you can get almost 8 to 9 without really even trying with the newer trucks.
Yep.
Versus now with the older trucks, you really had to work to get those kind of numbers.
It was next to impossible. You could get it, but it depends on where you were running. You were doing, if you got around 7.5 on most of those, you were really doing well.
Right.
Yep.
I know back then I was averaging right around 7 miles per gallon with my older Freightliner
Yep.
Columbia. My old Freightliner no. Yeah, it was a Columbia.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get confused between the Columbias and the Centuries.
Yes.
I had both of them, but those old Detroit 12 liter engines, they were 12.7s were pretty good trucks, and like I say, almost down there bulletproof.
They were bulletproof. But Rico, remember, in 2007 was the last year for any of the good engines. Okay. Mm-hmm. All this nonsense started in 2008. That is 16, almost 17 years ago. That's the last one built. And a lot of those weren't, the 2007s, a lot of those trucks even had, it was just before 2008. And even some of those trucks were not and I will say, I'll say it on air, they had issues with the twin turbo Caterpillars, for example.
Yeah.
They were problematic. Now that that 6NZ or 6NZ, probably the finest, that was a single turbo, probably one of the finest diesel engines ever built in the history of diesels.
Right.
That was the last one. Those things are worth their weight in gold. They really are.
Right. Well, I just wanted to, get into the financial appeal of owning your truck outright was that, once you completely pay for the truck, you won't have the ongoing monthly payments that you have to be responsible for. And so that allowed for you to be able to kind of that redirect or move that capital around for uses and other purposes within the business.
100%. So how this worked years ago was you would run a fleet of trucks, and I had some friends of mine do it. I was a big proponent of leasing right from the start. I bought a truck when I was a kid, and then when I got back into it to actually open up a trucking company, I started with one rental truck from Hertz, because Hertz was bought out by Penske years later. I started with one from Hertz, and by the end of the year, by a year later, I had 12 between Hertz and Ryder. So where would a 25-year-old kid get enough money for 12 trucks? And I started with $20,000. So it allowed me to scale, but it also allowed me not to have a yard, because I could park at their yard. That's huge. You get free parking. I could get the truck serviced.
Whoa. And just for a second, just to put some context to that, my yard where I can park my two pieces of equipment, where I park it, that runs me $500 a month.
They didn't have to pay that. I had to pay, I had cargo insurance because back in those days it was different and we were quote unquote gypsies. We were using Hertz and Riders insurance, so I didn't have to pay insurance. You can't use their insurance now as a motor carrier. Because the laws have all changed. So you have to have your own insurance. But my God, you don't need a shop. You don't need tools. When that truck breaks down 400 miles or 3,000 miles from home, you phone a 1-800 number and they give you another truck.
And that's a huge thing. Just for a second, because I want to touch these points while you're making them. That's a huge thing because nowadays one of the biggest problems that I have personally with owning equipment is finding someone that can adequately service the truck properly the first time. A lot of times you find I've ran into the unfortunate case of, if I can't get to my regular mechanic, or if he's backed up at the time that I deal with, going to the one-off shops and unfortunately the different places at the truck stops and stuff like that, then they don't have the most experienced techs, and they don't necessarily it's entry level. Let's just call it what it is. It's entry level, and they may not have the experience to be able to properly diagnose a situation that pops up, and that's a huge thing, is having the shop be able to maintenance, to troubleshoot the truck and find out, to properly diagnose what's going on with it, and then fixing it properly.
I totally diagnosed. I remember once we made the mistake many years ago of getting oil changed. This was a company truck that we owned. Oil changed on the road because it was overdue, and the driver took it into a truck stop, and the young fellow at the truck stop didn't put the drain plug back in properly. I don't have to tell you what happened to the engine. So that's what you're dealing with. At least if your leasing company used a mechanic or a technician that wasn't qualified or wasn't experienced, and he did something wrong, it's not your truck. So you wouldn't have to pay for that, for that engine, and they would just replace the truck. So there's a lot of benefits. And you really do see the nicest part that, the thing that always got me in trucking, it's the Wild West. So you go out and you have no idea what's going to happen on the trip, it goes back to something we talked about last week on our previous episode about a guy that took a load out, from Georgia to Texas for $1.30 a mile. And he goes out and something happens to that truck. The radiator goes. Where's he going to get the money for the radiator? He's not going to have the money. Where this way, if your radiator goes, you just call 1-800, Ryder or 1-800 Penske and say, listen, I got a problem. There's coolant all over the interstate. Send me another truck. I'm under a hot load. And they do. They send you another truck and away you go.
Right. So that's another huge advantage of being able to mitigate the downtime.
100%. Rico, I just want to add something here, if you don't mind. If you talk to anybody now that brings a newer truck in for service, one of the biggest complaints is that they can't get components. The dealers can't get them.
Right.
That happens frequently. Your truck's in, they diagnose it, but the part's on back order. I'm sure you've heard that 10 times. That does not happen with these leasing companies, because what happens is if the part is on back order, they just give you another truck. They keep you going because that's in their contract with you.
Right.
So, and years ago, there were some people in our industry that made a lot of money, and how they made money is they would buy trucks for $65,000. They would buy 100 trucks. I'm talking about large players, and they would run those trucks for 3 years, and they would sell them between 30 and 60,000. There were a couple of times because of inflation where people ran trucks for 3 years and they didn't depreciate. So they ran the trucks for 3 years with just putting tires and brakes on. But even I know one fella here in Canada that bought 100 trucks, him and his late dad. They ran them for about 36 months. They bought them for about 60,000, sold them for $30,000 each, and they got a check for $3 million. And they took, and that was a lot of money. It's a lot of money today, but you can't imagine how much $3 million was in 1985. Okay, that's like 15 million today.
So now, Chuck, I'm going to make sure that we're kind of being as informative as we can as well. Now, with these leases that we were just talking about, those are what they call the full maintenance lease, because there are different leases.
Yes.
So, because some people may be like, well, my lease doesn't cover that. What? Can we maybe break down? Can we talk a little bit about the different type of leases?
Yes. So number one, let's talk about, there's your financial lease, okay? And that is where you go, it's another way of financing. The advantage is it's 100% write-off, and you lease the truck from a party. You can lease it from anybody will do this, including the OEMs will do this as well quite often. And they charge you so much a month for the truck, but they don't cover anything other than beyond, just the warranty. That's all they cover. And then you look after your own service, you look after everything. Now, on a financial lease, it can be with a buyback, or you just give the truck back at the end. So usually with a financial lease, you'll, at the end of the lease, after 36 or 48 or 60 months, the lease ends, and you either give the truck back and you say, there you go, have your truck back, or you get to buy the truck for, let's say, $10,000 or $20,000. Okay, so that's number one lease. Number two is a full maintenance lease, and that's where a party like a Hertz or a Ryder or a Pack lease, or a national lease, will lease you a truck or rent you a truck, and they are responsible for all the maintenance. And when you are finished at the term of the lease, whether it's a 1-year lease, 6-month lease, or 60-month lease, you just give the truck back. They put it on the lot or send it to the auction, and if you want to release another one, away you go. Those are the two major ones. And there's a rental, which is on short term. And believe it or not, I always stuck with, for the most part, with the rentals. I didn't want to get tied into a long-term lease. Did a couple times, but the savings wasn't that great. I always figured it was enough risk sending drivers out in trucks. I didn't want to take on any more risks than we already were. So I would pay the extra, which wasn't that much. I think it was only about $100 a month difference between a long-term lease and a rental.
When you say a rental, is that more like the full maintenance lease type
full
deal?
Maintenance lease, but there was no, I could give it back after whatever the rental terms were. It could be for a month. After a month I could give it back, and we would put our name on them, because that would be, we'd have to have our name on them in a decal or something. But I found that to work the best for me overall. Because if something happened, I wasn't tied up into 60 months. I like the flexibility of that.
So normally with the full maintenance lease, those run from what 2 to 3 years or something like that?
Minimum, usually. You can get them for a year sometimes. You can even get, you maybe be able to, in this market, get them for 6 months. And anywhere from 6 months up to 60 months. Most of the time, Penske and Ryder want the truck back, but they will arrange for a buyback. If you have a truck and you say, listen, I like this truck, and at the end of 60 months, I want it in the terms that I can buy it back for $20,000 or $30,000, whatever it is, because these guys know their numbers. These are real accountants.
Right. So what I guess so if someone has the desire, we're talking about if you're looking at trying to scale, this leasing may not be such a boogeyman after all.
Hell no, Rico. I met a man down in New Jersey about 5 years ago. He hauled confection only. And confection has to be shipped at ambient temperature, which is around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. He had 750 rider trucks, and I believe his trailers were they were all leased trailers. I'm pretty sure they were from Ryder as well. And you know what? He ran a great business. He ended up actually selling the business. But here's a man that built a business to 750 units using Ryder equipment. And he didn't have to have a shop. He didn't have to have much of a yard. He didn't have to have mechanics. He knew the first of the month what those trucks cost. There's not a listener out there that knows that. Because
right. So
the only thing you have to be wary of when you run rental trucks is you are responsible if you mess up a tire. If you pick up a hunk of metal on the road, you are responsible for that. Once we had a truck drive over chicken wire, which is one of the worst things we ever drove over. It tore wires and all sorts of stuff off that truck. That cost us because it wasn't Penske's fault.
Right. So I'm just curious. I'm trying to get do the math on all of this to see if this is going to be a good decision as far as, like I say, for someone that is trying to scale, it definitely would be maybe a real viable option. As far as the one truck guy, he may have to sit down and make sure his pencil is sharp on this deal to make sure that he can make it work as far as the numbers are concerned.
Yes, but if he's got a good, if he's hauling something where he's getting paid well enough, it works. Now, the one thing that the rental companies now are aware of that they, when I started with them back, 1978, they hadn't figured this out yet, but they certainly got smart. Now they know that the first question they're going to ask you is, where do you run and how many miles a year are you doing? They used to have an attitude where they didn't care. They'd say, team operation, go ahead. We don't care. Well, we were putting 25,000 miles a month on a truck. A truck would run 300,000 miles a year. And, they didn't care. They were happy to get back in those days, I guess I'm giving my age away, I think it was 5 or 6 cents a mile. They were so thrilled to get that 5 or 6 cents a mile. They didn't realize it was costing them probably 10 cents a mile to give me the truck at 5, because I beat the hell out of the trucks within a year because we were running California with teams. So now they're smarter. Okay, they're going to ask you where you're running, and if you do run a team operation, they'll still lease you the truck, but they're going to charge you more because they know that if you kept that truck for 3 years, it's not worth anything, other than really scrap after, being on a team operation for 36 months.
Right. So, but at the end of the day, if you were to price it all out, say if you had if a lease payment, full maintenance lease, say for instance, we'll just throw an arbitrary number out there, say it's $3,200 a month.
Yep.
That probably ends up working itself out in the wash to being beneficial for everybody involved.
Well, you have the $3,200 a month. Then you're going to have your mileage charge. Now, the mileage charge is the real cost. So you've got a couple of components here. The $3,200 a month is the cost for the equipment. Okay, that's what that piece of equipment costs them. Where the leasing companies like Penske and Ryder, where they make all their money is when they sell that truck.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they make their money. So the $3,200 a month is what it really costs for a great operator to own a brand new truck like the one they're going to give you. It doesn't matter the make, it's irregardless. That's their cost. The next cost that you have to bear is their mileage charge. And they will charge you so much a mile, or if you're up in Canada, so much a kilometer. I think in the US, it's probably, I'm going to guess it's probably about 10 or 15 cents a mile, if I'm not mistaken,
Right.
on a lease. That, the boys and girls out there are going to go, whoa, that's a lot of money. My God, that's what it costs. That's what it costs for tires and brakes. That's what it really costs. And remember, you buy, 10 tires at a time or 8 tires at a time. These guys are getting 80 truckloads of tires at a time. So they're getting tires a hell of a lot cheaper than you and I are ever getting them. And they pass that on to you. So that's their cost to run the maintenance for that truck. It includes, oil changes and everything else. And they are on this program. They're all on this program. I shudder because I wouldn't do it with my equipment, but they have extended. They use synthetic oils, synthetic lubricants, and they have extended life on all of that stuff because these guys are accountants, and they have figured out that by extending fluid changes, they can save millions of dollars. Plus, they're good stewards of the environment.
So when you break it down and you look at the different you got the different type of leases and things of that nature, which one would you say would probably, if let's break it down into 2 categories. Let's talk about, first off, let's talk about the guy that may be just satisfied with being the one truck Charlie, one truck. Which option may be the best for him with the buyback lease, where he's going to be responsible if he's wanting to try to run newer equipment, and just turn that truck in every, however often that lease turns over, just turn that truck in, but he's still responsible for the whatever maintenance that he's going to have it for that time, the oil changes and things of that nature, oil change, tires and brakes. And if he's running, and if it's a newer truck, that should really be the main things that go wrong on that truck for that time period.
They should be, but then again, you do risk the chance with those leases, if something happens and that truck is sidelined in the shop because you can't get the component you need, then that's on you.
So you have to eat that downtime.
Remember, Rico, when you lease a truck, you're on a financial lease. You're not really leasing a truck. You're leasing the money.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So all those guys did was they leased you money. They lent you money. That's all they did. They don't really care that, number 4 injector and the turbo went, and they're not going to bring any into North America for at least 6 weeks, and your truck is sitting and you're not turning a dime, and you still have to make those payments.
Right.
And that is with newer trucks, anything built after 2008, those aren't unheard of.
That's the gamble.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what make. Nobody's standing up there saying, with our truck, if you buy one of my trucks and it's sidelined, we've got another one sitting for you. Nobody does that.
It's under warranty, but it's not. But that doesn't do you any good if the wheels can't turn.
Yeah, what are you gonna do for money? And meanwhile, you still have to make those payments.
Right.
So even if you go work for a friend of yours driving his truck, are you going to make enough money to pay your rent or your mortgage payment, feed your wife and kids, and pay the $3,200 or whatever it is for a monthly payment?
Right.
Okay. That's the danger there in this market. And listen, I'll be honest, I don't like any of these new trucks. I haven't seen one yet. I heard of one, but I haven't seen one yet that seems to be bulletproof.
Yeah.
Not like the stuff that we used to, that we ran back, in 2000. Those trucks were bulletproof. These things are just, They're chintzy. They are, all of them are.
So would it be time to go ahead and would it be your suggestion it may be time to go take old Betsy out and put her to pasture, go put it up at the auction and go sign up for a full maintenance lease?
You know what? It's certainly it's a very viable alternative if you've got to go out and buy newer equipment for what you're doing. If the type of work that you do requires you to have newer equipment, then yeah, because I can't see personally, I can't see owning it, Rico. The risk, as I said earlier, I don't have an appetite. I think running a truck is a big enough risk. Just with the nuclear settlements and all the idiots out there, that's enough gamble for me. I wouldn't want to add any more gamble and go out and buy a $200,000 or $250,000 truck today and hope that it does, it works flawlessly, because I haven't heard any that are.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know. And this is probably some stuff that you, ladies and gentlemen, you would have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that it fits into your operation. But I'm sure your agent wouldn't mind helping you out with running those numbers, quoting the insurance for that type of truck and the operation, and see what that does to your bottom line. Because I think you definitely need to sit back. I'm contemplating on running the numbers myself to figure out, because like I say, one of the biggest things that I'm having a problem with, like I say, is finding good quality maintenance. And if you can if you can get the maintenance baked into the payment, it's almost a no-brainer.
And these newer trucks aren't that easy to work on.
Right.
That's
right.
That's the other issue. It's not like, I knew guys that would rebuild, Cummins engines on the weekend in their driveway. You can't do that with these new trucks.
Yeah.
So you really do need to have somebody like a Penske or a Ryder on your side, so that at least when the truck needs service, you can get it serviced.
Indeed.
So you are paying for all these things, but you've got to find customers that are willing to pay for this, because now all of a sudden you're unstoppable. But there's a price for that. You
Right.
want to ride in a Rolls Royce, you got to pay more than in a Kia.
Right.
It's a different ride, but I can guarantee, we'll be there, because this is how we do it. Some of our listeners I know are involved in things like the entertainment world. They're moving sets around for theatrical groups and rock groups and this sort of thing. And those guys can't afford to be late.
Right.
So if you're doing work like that, if you're doing bottom of the barrel work, you know what? I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you should be doing bottom of the barrel work. Because this is the real, ladies and gentlemen, this is like, take all the dressing off it. This is the real cost of operating a new truck today.
Yep.
And it's going to cost you less to operate that truck through a Penske or Ryder than it does even a company like Schneider or JB Hunt, because on top of the payment, paying for the truck and the maintenance, they still have layers of management. You don't.
Yeah.
So you've got that advantage being a single or small operator. But, even if some of our listeners are thinking that they're perhaps expanding, and you want to expand in tough times because it makes you tough. If you have work for 5 trucks, then in this market, and it's good work, then when things get real good, eventually you'll do real well.
Absolutely. Well, Chuck, anything else that you might want to share with us when it comes to leasing a truck versus buying a new truck? The pros and cons.
Well, I can't see buying a new truck today in most cases. It just doesn't make sense. unless unless you've got, maybe you're a trained mechanic. That may be a little bit different. Okay. If you have the skill set to be able to keep these new trucks on the road and you've got a shop, well, then, you know what, that's a little bit different. But
Right.
for our average, small operator or even single owner operator that wants to get ahead and do things right, this is a great way to do it. And these things, as a rule, when you drive over the plate and you've got a Ryder truck, Penske truck, they're not as quick to pull you in because they know those trucks are maintained.
Right.
But you got to do your part too, make sure it's clean. And they'll wash them for you even. That's included. They will, and I don't know how it works now, whether it's unlimited washes or what, but there is a wash, there's a wash thing in there that's included. So you still have to operate with clean equipment because it's a Penske or Ryder truck. Does not mean you can put a bunch of rubbish on the dashboard and look like an idiot when you're driving over the plate. That does not entitle that. But if you're a clean operator, chances are the guy tending the scale is going to, or woman tending the scale is going to go, oh, you know what? I'm not worried about this one. Next, we got the fish to fry.
Right. And that definitely, can help you. Like you say, that can be a benefit when they're going across and making sure and improving your overall CSA scores and things of that nature as well.
100%, because that way, when you're talking to a good broker or a direct customer that wants to make sure they're dealing with good people, this helps them make that decision.
Right. Well, Chuck, I definitely appreciate it. It's been informative. It definitely gives something to think about. Maybe to go back and create a spreadsheet and see, do a cost analysis to make sure that everything, at the end of the day, everybody has to do their own due diligence for their operations. But I think it's a compelling argument to be said that maybe you might want to weigh, especially with the fuel mileage cost, because I think some of the things that the savings that you make up in fuel savings might be enough to help offset the cost of leasing.
Well, yeah, and right now I think that the OEMs and their leasing companies and the banks are very, very hesitant towards lending anybody money for a new truck. Especially an owner operator, because things have been tough, and then we've just had so many bankruptcies in the industry. We have fallen out of favor as an industry with Wall Street.
Absolutely.
A few years ago, we were their darlings. They couldn't throw enough money in our jeans. But that's all changed. We've done a 180-degree turn through no fault of our. Well, I guess it's our own fault because we have people out there taking cheap freight. So that is our fault. But there's been some bad. There's been some real bad players out there that have been fraudulent, and there have been other ones that have just been unlucky. Okay. The music stopped playing. They didn't have a chair.
Right.
Or they just got tired of red ink. People that were operating on razor thin margins even before, and then the industry got bad and they just gave it up. And some of them were longtime family businesses. So there's not that appetite for lending out there. And you got to be careful because there's some unscrupulous lenders what they will do is they will tell you that they're going to give you, they're going to do a lease for you, financial lease at, let's say, 6 or 7%. Make sure you have somebody look over that and make sure, because I had one where it was many years ago when interest rates were higher and it was 8%. And I looked at it and it didn't look right. And I am not an accountant by profession. And I went to our CA and I said, Carm, would you look at this? It doesn't look like it comes out to 8%. I don't see where this guy's trying to tell me it's 8%. And he called me back and he said, no, it's not 8%, 16%.
Woo.
Yes, but they hide things, you see. So just be careful. Not everybody out there is your friend.
Okay. That's why I say you got to make sure you're doing your own due diligence.
Yes, and then go and get a second before you sign a contract. Make sure you get a second opinion. And one other thing, if you're signing a contract, like any other agreement, it's like going in to a crowded dance hall in Manila in the Philippines. Always make sure you know where the exit is.
Sage advice indeed.
You know, I had a business partner many years ago in a factoring business, a factoring business we had. Um, 25 years ago, and he was a genius. This guy he sold a company he had started at 15 years old. He sold it when he was 40 for $20 million for his end. So he was a very smart man. And he said that to me, always look for the exit. And I always pass that on to people. It was sage advice.
Absolutely.
So we want to
Absolutely.
make sure there's some way to get out of it in case things go sideways. We don't know what's happening. You know,
Yeah.
we have a different administration in Washington that can have different effects on our financial outcome. We have no idea, so just be careful. Just the world is changing, business is changing. Things may get really good really fast, but they may not. Okay. So, err on caution.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, Chuck, thank you again for breaking this down, helping shed a little bit more light and give us some more insight into whether or not this may or may not be a good trigger to pull, so to speak. So,
I think
like,
it is. And now, listen, this is one that's really, really dear to my heart, ladies and gentlemen. So, if you have any questions about it, when you're seeing this, I will be over on the other side of the world, over in Australia, but hopefully I'll have email. If you have any questions, I won't readily be able to phone you, but put your phone number on there anyways. It may have to wait till I get back. But if you have questions about this, it would be my honor to answer them. And you can email me chucksnow280@outlook.com, and I'll get back to you with the best answers I can.
all right. Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Rates and Lanes podcast. Hopefully, you gained some great information and insight from today's episode. If you would do us a huge favor, like, share, and subscribe to the show, especially if you found any of this information useful, entertaining at all. Tell a friend to tell a friend about the show. And with that being said, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took some time to hang out with us. We're always grateful for you doing so. If you would, please stay safe, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. God bless you and good night.
Catch on the flip flop.